Message to the Black Man by Elijah Muhammad, Part 2. Allah, the best knower. There are many other chapters of the Quran, Sharif, that will open up the above words. Allah is the best knower. The beautiful teachings of the Holy Quran have no equal in other scriptures. Allah, so-called Negro preachers, should have one, but be sure it is the one translated by Yusuf Ali or Maulvi Muhammad Ali. Any other translation of the Quran by Christian authors is as poisonous to the reader as a rattlesnake. What I'm trying to make clear is that white people do not believe in Allah and Islam or the prophets of Allah. Why then should you seek the truth from them? You will soon come to know that you should not seek any truth from them. They have you following in the wrong direction and hope to keep you like that. But by Allah's power and wisdom and my life's blood, you will know the truth, even against your own will. They, white people, have nearly all of the poor black preachers on their side to oppose Allah, myself, and Islam, the religion of righteous. They will fail and be brought to disgrace as Pharaoh's magicians, and he himself were by Allah God. For you have not known him or his religion, as Israel has not known God by his name, Jehovah. And that's in Exodus chapter 6, verse 3. They felt that they should not believe Moses' representation of God by any other name than God Almighty, regardless of Moses' stress upon Jehovah as being the God of their fathers. Pharaoh had not used that name Jehovah, so Israel would not accept it until a showdown between Jehovah and Pharaoh. I would not like to have you wait until a showdown between Allah and the modern Pharaoh people. Therefore I come to you with the truth, verifying that which is before it, and giving good news to the believers that they most certainly shall have heaven in this life. I also come to you with a warning to those who disbelieve that you most certainly shall have hell in this life, and in the hereafter you most certainly will be among the losers. Or do they say, he has forged it? No, it is the truth from thy Lord, that you may warn the people to whom no warning has come before, that they may follow the right direction. Holy Quran, Surah 32, Ayat 3. You say, who is Allah and this religion, Islam? Know, my people, the divine supreme being has 99 attributes that make up his name, and Allah is the 100th. Surely his are the most beautiful names. He will make himself known to the world that he is God, and beside him there is no God. And I am his messenger, that Islam is a religion backed by the power of Allah to free you from the hands of your merciless enemies once and forever. Allah, your God, will grant you power to overcome your enemies through their power, though their power may look as endurable as the mountains. Fear not, Allah is the best knower. Armageddon has started, and after it there will be no Christian religions or churches. Jesus was a Muslim, not a Christian. What is meant by the days of Allah and the battles between right and wrong? They are often mentioned as follows: the days of judgment, the days of resurrection, the day of the Son of Man, and the days of Allah. These days must not be mistaken for the regular 24-hour day. No, the days of Allah, the days of the resurrection, the days of the judgment, and the days of the Son of Man mean years, not the common 24-hour day. What will make us know when we are living in the days of Allah? It is by the fulfilling of the predictions made by the prophets of Allah long before they come to pass. I quote Maulvi Muhammad Ali footnote 2276 on this verse, in which he says, the days of Allah are the contest in which the righteous shall be made successful. This is a sign for the disbelievers who have enjoyed temporary prosperity and who taught that they were too rich and powerful to be brought into a state of helplessness. Although they had the histories of those who were before them, there is no difference between the disbelievers today or the past. We are living in the days of Allah. The earth and its people have been ruled by the evil race known as the white race. In these days of Allah the righteous, the Muslims are now gaining power over the wicked and will soon rule the earth again as they did before the creation of the white race. Take notice of my followers who have given up the wicked ways of the white race and their self-styled Christianity and have accepted the truth. They are gradually becoming the most successful people in the world. Allah has chosen us. We have chosen Allah. Who can successfully oppose Allah in his days and the time of rule? It is easy for a weak and poverty-stricken people to give up, but it is not so easy when they are powerful and wealthy. They think there will be no end to their power and wealth, which is made to deceive them. If God was your father, you will love me. Read and study the above chapter of John, chapter 8, verse 42. All of you who are Christians, believer in the Bibles and Jesus, as you say, if you understand it right, you will agree with me that the whole Caucasian race is a race of devils. They have proved to be devils in the gardens of paradise and were condemned 4,000 years later by Jesus. Likewise, they are condemned today by the great Mahdi Muhammad as being nothing but devils in the plainest language. The so-called American Negroes have been deceived and blinded by their unlikeness, soft, smooth, buttered words, eye-winking, back-patting, a false show of friendship, and handshaking. The above-mentioned acts, with the exception of handshaking, by men are a disgrace to any decent, intelligent person. Know the truth and be free of such disgrace. Surely if the father of the two prophets, black and white, were the same, the two will love each other because they are of the same flesh and blood. It is natural then for them to love each other. Again, it is not unnatural then for a member or members of a different race or nation not to love the non-member of their race or nation as their own. The nature in which we are created will not allow us to be like that, and it works the same in all things living that have a bit of intelligence, including the birds and the beast. The argument here between Jesus and the Jews, in that the Jews claim that they were all the same people, children of one God or Father, but this Jesus disagreed with and proved they were not from the same Father. He, having a knowledge of both fathers, knew their father, the devil, before his fall and before he had produced his children, the white race, of whom the Jews are members. Here in this chapter 8 of John, it shows there was no love in the Jews for Jesus. He, Master Muhammad, God in person, chose to suffer 3.5 years to show his love for his people, who have suffered over 300 years at the hand of a people by nature are evil and wicked and no good in them. He was persecuted, sent to jail in 1932, and ordered out of Detroit on May 26, 1933. He came to Chicago in that same year and was arrested almost immediately on his arrival and placed behind prison bars. He submitted himself with all the humbleness to his prosecutors. Each time he was arrested, he sent for me so that I might see and learn the price of truth for us, the so-called American Negroes, members of the Asiatic nation. He was well able to save himself from such suffering. But how else was the scriptures to be fulfilled? We follow in his footsteps, suffering the same persecution. My people are yet sound asleep to the knowledge of the good thing that is being carried on for their deliverance. The whole world of our kind awaits the awakening, and our awakening is the last step in the resurrection and judgment of the world. It is a sin that we were put so soundly to sleep. The end of the world has arrived, and most of us know it not. Our enemy's greatest desire is that we remain asleep. My people fight and oppose the God of our own salvation. Allah chose for us Islam as a religion. He desires to set us in heaven at once, on condition that we submit to him and accept the religion of Islam, the religion of God and his prophets. In this religion, Islam, he offers us universal friendship, and we who have submitted to him know this to be true. We know white people have and will continue to persecute anyone who offers to help us, the so-called American Negroes. Should persecution or even death stop the worthy help that will save the lives of the so-called Negroes? No, it shall not. The so-called Negroes are absolutely friendless and have sought in vain friendship from their enemies due to the ignorance of their self and their enemies. Now they are offered universal friendship if they will only accept their own, Allah and Islam. Seek first the friendship of your own people and then the friendship of others, if there is any friendship in others. We have made the grave mistake of Lazarus and the prodigal son. That's in the book of Luke, chapter 15. The one who was so charmed over the wealth and food of the rich man that he could not leave his gate to seek the same for himself, regardless of the disgraceful condition in which the rich man puts him, even to sending his dogs to attack him. The angels had to come and take him away. The other prodigal son, being tempted by those loose life of strange women, drinking, gambling, and adultery, caused him to love the stranger ways of life so much that it cost him all that he originally possessed, self-independence and divine guidance. His father, God in person, had to come and be his representative to again meet his brothers, family, and friends. Nothing fits the description of us better, the so-called Negroes. Many of us today are so lazy that we are willing to suffer anything rather than go to do for self. It is true that our God has come to set us in heaven, but not a heaven wherein we will not have to work. Fear is the worst enemy that we have, but entire submission to Allah God and His Messenger will remove this fear. The white race has put fear in our foreparents when they were babies. So says the word of Allah. We must have for our peace and happiness the 17 million so-called Negroes that which other nations have. This before mentioned peace and happiness cannot come under any flag but our own. If God desires for us such joy, why shouldn't we give up begging and be real men and sit with the rulers of the earth ruling our own? Our first step is to give back the white man his religion, Christianity, his church, and his names. These three are chains of slavery that hold us in bondage to them. We are free when we give up the above three. The so-called Negroes must know that they have been deceived and must be brought face to face with God and the devil. They must get away from that old slavery teaching that Jesus, who was killed 2,000 years ago, is still alive somewhere waiting and listening to their prayers. He was only a prophet like Moses and the other prophets, and he had the same religion, Islam. He did his work and is dead like others of his time and has no knowledge of their prayers to him. Since Islam overran mankind in the 7th century after Jesus and is still a power over man, why did not the translators of the Bible mention it? Why didn't they give us the name of the religion of the prophets, since they claim a religion for Jesus? The number one principle of belief is that your God is one God, and besides him you have no other God that can help you. I shall begin with this, the most important of all principles of belief. How many non-Muslims will find who do not believe in God as being one God? Regardless of the Trinity belief preached by Christians, the Christians, claim and agree that Allah God is one. They make fools of themselves when they reject Islam and the Muslims' 5 principles of belief: one God, his prophets, his books, the resurrection, and the judgment. How then did the Christians, go astray from believing in 3 gods? Nevertheless, they make one of the 3 the Father and the other 2, and these remaining 2 equal to the Father. The so-called Negroes have been led into the gravest of errors in the knowledge of God and the true religion, Islam, by their white slave masters. The so-called Negroes, have been robbed more than any other people on the planet Earth. If they will only read and listen to the simplest of truths of which I write and speak, have 3 essentials in it: power, light, and life. I am a mortal like you. It is revealed to me that your God is one God. and that is in Surah 18, Ayat 110. Will you not bear witness that Muhammad, in the above quoted chapter and the verse of the Holy Quran, the white race will not agree with Muhammad and the true religion of Islam and the true religion of God, Allah, which is Islam, because of the nature in which they were created, as they are the opposers of Allah and the truth. They, the white people, know that the so-called Negroes believe in them, but with the help of my God, Allah, who came in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, we will show up the false with the truth in its plainest and simplest form. It is foolish to believe in three gods, foolish to make Jesus the Son and the equal of his Father, the one of 2,000 years ago. If Jesus said in his suffering, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" in Matthew 27, verse 46, then most surely he did not recognize himself as being the equal of a God, and no other scripture shows Jesus as the equal of God. If Jesus said that he was sent in Matthew chapter 15, verse 24, and John chapter 4, verse 34, then he cannot claim to be equal of his sender. God is not sent by anyone. He is a self-sender. He says in Isaiah chapter 44, verse 8, and chapter 45, verse 22, "Is there a God besides me? I know not any." In another place he states, "I am God. There is none else." Isaiah 46, verse 9, also one God and none other. Mark 12, verse 32. Today is the day in which the God of justice, Allah, is judging between man and nation and nation. To understand the present, we must learn of the past. We are 4,000 years from Moses, and Moses was 2,000 years after the creation of the Caucasian race, or 2,000 years after the fathers of the Caucasian or white race of Europe. This makes 6,000 years from the time of the birth or grafting of the Caucasian race. In 4,000 years of the white man's rule, they have practiced and exercised their power and authority over us as we divinely given to them. The trouble is going on between the so-called Negroes and American white people, who have always shown themselves to be the enemies and haters of their slaves, the so-called Negro. This thing must come to an end. So God himself intervenes to make manifested to people everything that is of good. According to recorded history, has trouble in its infancies, but as it grows, it triumphs in the end. The so-called Negroes must know the truth. This is the only way to bring them into the light of truth, as they are spiritually blind to the knowledge of themselves, but God himself. Prophets of God can only deliver the truth to the people, but to make them to believe, see, and understand it, and accept or reject it, this must come from God. It took the destruction of a people of Korah by Almighty God to make Israel understand that it was God who had appointed Moses to lead them, and that self-made leaders such as Korah would not work in the way of delivering Israel another country. Because Allah had chosen Moses to act as a guide for Israel, and all other self-made leaders would be failures, he sent poisonous and fiery serpents against them to bite and kill those who rebelled. So this is a warning and a sign for us today that when God intends to separate a people or remove a people and put another in their stead, it is his work and the people who rebel against his work who will come to nothing. The so-called American Negroes must learn these truths today, that they cannot deliver themselves from the evils that they are suffering from the white race without the help of Allah. You see the trouble that our people and the American whites are suffering from the struggle of our people with a few whites on their side to bring about integration between the two races, of which is opposed by God himself. It is the same time that the two people should separate. Islam, the religion of entire submission to the will of Allah God. No, whoever submits his whole self to Allah and is a doer of good, he will get his reward with his Lord. On such shall be no fear, nor shall they grieve. That is in the Quran, Surah 2, Ayat 112. That and that alone is salvation according to the Holy Quran. Fear is the number one enemy that is blocking progress and success from becoming to the so-called Negro. This fear causes them to grieve. The whole world knows the poor so-called Negroes of America have suffered and still suffer more grief and sorrow than any people on the earth. This fear is the fear of the slave masters and what the slave masters dislike. Let the so-called Negroes submit to Allah God, and they will not fear anymore, nor will they grieve. As it is written, the fear of man bringeth a snare. Proverbs chapter 29. It has surely snared the so-called Negroes. The Lord of the worlds, finder of we the lost members of the Asiatic black nation for 400 years, said that the slave masters put fear in our fathers when they were babies. Allah is the only one that can remove this fear from us, but he will not remove it from us until we submit to his will, not our will, and fear him and him alone. Then as it is written, and it shall come to pass in the day that the Lord shall give thee rest from thy sorrow and thy fear, and from the hard bondage wherein thou wast made to serve. That's in the book of Isaiah chapter 14 verse 3. There are so many places that I could point out in the Bible and Quran that warns us of fearing our enemies above or equal to the fear of Allah God. It is a fool who has a greater fear of the devils, meaning the white race, than Allah, who has power to destroy the devils and their followers. We must remember that if Islam means entire submission to the will of Allah, that and that alone is the true religion of Allah. Do not you and your religious teachers and the prophets of old teach that the only way to receive God help or guidance is to submit his will? Then why not Islam? Islam is the true religion of Allah and the only way to success. It is the knowledge of self that the so-called Negroes lack, which keeps them from enjoying freedom, justice, and equality. This belongs to them divinely as much as it does to other nations of the earth. It is Allah God's will and purpose that we shall know ourselves. Therefore he came to teach us the knowledge of self. Who is better knowing of who we are than God himself? He has declared that we are the descendants of the Asiatic black nation and of the tribe of Shabazz. You may ask, who is this tribe of Shabazz? Originally, they were the tribe that came with the earth, or at least this part of the earth, 66 trillion years ago when a great explosion on our planet divided it into two parts. One we call Earth and the other Moon. This was done by one of our scientists, God, who wanted the people to speak one language, one dialect for all, but was unable to bring this about. He decided to kill us by destroying our planet, but still he failed. We were lucky to be on this part, Earth, which did not lose its water in the mighty blasting away of the part called Moon. We, the tribe of Shabazz, says Allah God, were the first to discover the best part of our planet to live on, the rich Nile Valley of Egypt and present seat of the holy Mecca city, Arabia. The origin of our kinky hair, says Allah, came from one of our dissatisfied scientists 50,000 years ago who wanted to make all of us tough and hard in order to endure the life of the jungle of East Asia, Africa, and to overcome the beasts there. But he failed to get the others to agree with him. He took his family and moved into the jungle to prove to us that we could live there and conquer the wild beasts. And we have. So, being the first and the smartest scientist on the deportation of our moon, and the one who suffered most of all, Allah God has decided to place us on top with a thorough knowledge of self and guidance. We are the mighty, the wise, the best, but do not know it. Being without the knowledge, we disgrace ourselves, subjecting ourselves to suffering and shame. We cannot get the knowledge of self until the coming of Allah. To know thyself is to know all men, as from us came all, and to us all will return. I must keep warning you that you should give up the white race's name and religion in order to gain access. Their days of success are over. Their rule will last only as long as you remain asleep to the knowledge of self. Awake and know that Allah has revealed the truth. Stop believing in something coming to you after you are physically dead. This is untrue, and no one can show you any proof of such belief. Again, know that Jesus was only a prophet and cannot hear you pray any more than Moses or any other dead prophet. Know too that this white race was created to be the enemy of black mankind for 6,000 years, which makes their numbers to be 6. This is not your number or mine. We do not have a number because we have no birth record. Do not let anyone fool you. This is the separation and the war of Armageddon. One of the greatest handicaps among the so-called Negroes is that there is no love for self, nor love for his own or her own kind. This is not having love for self is the root cause of hate, disunity, disagreement, quarreling, betraying, stool pigeons, and fighting and killing one another. How can you be loved if you have not love for self and your own nation, and dislike being a member of your own? Then what nation will trust your love and membership? You say of yourself, I love everybody. This cannot be true. Love for self comes first. The Bible, the book that you claim to believe, says, love thy brotherhood. First book of Peter, chapter 2, verse 17. Love one another. Book of John, chapter 15, verse 17. Love of self comes first. The one who loves everybody is the one who does not love anyone. This is the false teaching of the Christians, for the Christians war against Christians. They have the Bible so twisted by adding in and taking out of the truth that it takes only God or one whom God has given the knowledge of the book to understand it. The Bible puts more stress upon the love for thy neighbor than the love for thy brother. When asked, who is my neighbor? The answer was contrary and incorrect. Jesus' answer was that of two men who were on a journey. They were not far from the same place. One was from Jerusalem and the other one was from Samaritan. The Samaritan came to where the man from Jerusalem lay wounded by the robbers who had stripped him of his possessions. The Samaritan showed sympathy for the fellow traveler. He was not a neighbor in the sense of the word. A neighbor can be an enemy. Many enemies live in the same neighborhood of a good neighborhood. But the answer that Jesus gave was a futile one, which could be classified as a parable of the so-called Negroes and their slave masters. The so-called Negroes fell into the hand of the slave masters who have robbed, spoiled, wounded, and killed them. The Good Samaritan here would be the Mahdi, Allah God in the person, as he is often referred to by the Christians as the second coming of Jesus or the Son of Man to judge man. This one will befriend the poor, the so-called Negroes, and heal their wounds by pouring into their heads knowledge of self and others, and free them from the yoke of slavery and kill the slave masters, as Jehovah did in the case of Pharaoh and his people to free Israel from bondage and the false religion of the gods of Pharaoh. There are many other proofs in the Bible which agree with the above answer. Love yourself and kind. Let us refrain from doing evil to each other, and let us love each other as brothers, as we are the same flesh and blood. In this way, you and I will not have any trouble in uniting. It is a fool who does not love himself and his people. Your black skin is the best, and never try changing its colors. Stay away from intermixing with your slave master's children. Love thyself and thy kind. There are some efforts to celebrate the so-called Negroes History Week, and for some of my people, they will participate. The planning of that week to teach the slave a knowledge of his past is not complete, sufficient, or comprehensive enough to enable my people to learn the true knowledge of themselves. It is important that my people learn the true knowledge of self, as it means their salvation. We are not Negroes because God, whose proper name is Allah, has taught me who we are. We are not colored people because God has taught me who the colored people are. The American Negro is without a knowledge of self. You are a so-called Negro because you're not a Negro. Allah has given to me our proper names, the people from whom we were taken and brought here to the shores of North America, and the history of our forefathers. Allah has taught me, and today I do not fear to tell you that you can discard that name. Negro, we are not Negroes. We are not colored. Those are some of the main things which we should remember. We must become aware of the knowledge of self and that the time in which we are living. You must know these things whether you agree that Elijah Muhammad is on time or out of time. If what I say is out of season, it goes for nothing. If I am on time or in season, then all I say will bear fruit. There is much understanding among us because of our inferior knowledge of self. We have been to schools where they do not teach us the knowledge of self. We have been to schools of our slave masters' children. We have been to their schools and gone as far as they allowed us to go. That was not far enough for us to learn the knowledge of self. The lack of knowledge of self is one of our main handicaps. It blocks us throughout the world. If you were the world and you were a part of the world, you will also turn a man down if he did not know who he actually was. If we, the so-called Negroes, do not know our own selves, how can we be accepted by people who have a knowledge of self? Are we representing ourselves as Negroes and colored people in the ancient history of black men? Our search of the ancient history of the black men of the earth will prove that not once in time were Negroes or colored people living in Asia or Africa. How did we come to be those names? The names are from the slave masters. They have called us by their names and nicknames used among themselves. It even seems that we like being called by the slave master's name. After nearly 100 years of freedom, we are still representing ourselves by the names our slave masters called us. We must learn that the slave masters' names are not accepted by God or by the righteous people of God. It is time for us to learn who we really are, and it is time for us to understand ourselves. That true knowledge is here for you today, whether you accept it or reject it. God has said that we are members of the original people or black nation of the earth. Original means first. Historian J.A. Rogers points out in his book that beyond the cotton fields of the South and long before the white man himself was a part of our planet, we were the original people ruling the earth. And according to the Holy Quran, we had governments superior to any we are experiencing today. Trace over the earth. Check back 50,000, 10,000, or 20,000 years ago. Look at history. Who were those people? They were our people. And today we are confronted with proof of who the original people are and who shall live on this earth and call it their own. Many of the people of the so-called Negroes say we should help the nations of Africa which are awakening. This has been said as if we owned America. We are so foolish. What part of America do you have that you can offer toward helping Africa, who is independent, the nations of Africa, or we? The best act would be to request the independent governments of Africa and Asia to help us. We are the ones who need help. We have little or nothing to offer as help to others. We should begin to help at home first. We are 20 million strong. Many of the nations today that have their independence and those who are getting their independence are much smaller in number than my own people in America. We are dependent on the slave masters. We do not have 2 feet of earth for our nation of people. You and I, here in America, are licking the boot of our slave masters, begging him for the right of independent people. Yes, we are licking his boots. Sir, let me shine your shoes. You have been doing that for approximately 400 years. Today, if one rises up in your midst and says, we should not lick the slave master's boots, we should lick our own boots, you would say, he should be killed. He is a dangerous man. Get that fear out of you and stand up for your people. Who are you not to die for your own people? Who am I not to die for my own people? If I am shot down or cut down today, who is little Elijah Muhammad to 20 million of you? If a million of us throw ourselves in the fire for the benefit of 20 million, the loss would be so small compared to the great gain our people would make as a result of that sacrifice. Hundreds of thousands of Muslims gave their lives in Pakistan to get their nation independence. They were successful. The black men in Africa are fighting and dying today in unity for their independence. We sit here like pampered babies. We cannot even stand up on the floor, not to mention taking a chance of crawling out of the door. We are too careful of shedding blood for ourselves. We are willing to shed all of it for the benefit of others. I am not trying to get you to fight. This is not even necessary. Our unity will win the battle. Not one of us will have to raise a sword. Not one gun we will need to fire. The great cannon that will be fired is our unity. Our unity is the best. Why are you afraid to unite? Why are you afraid to accept Allah and Islam? It is only because the slave master did not teach you of this. We must unite to ourselves as a nation of people. Separation of the so-called Negroes from their slave masters' children is a must. It is the only solution to our problems. You must know that this is the time of our separation and the judgment of this world, the Caucasian world, which you and I have known. Therefore, Allah has said to me that the time is right for you and me to accept our own, the whole planet Earth. Are you waiting for the divine destruction? Come, let us reason together. First, in order for us to reason, you must have a thorough knowledge of self. Who is going to teach you that knowledge of self? Who are you waiting for to teach you the knowledge of self? Surely not your slave master who blinded you to the knowledge of self. The slave master will not teach you the knowledge of self, as they would not be a master-slave relationship any longer. Men everywhere are seeking unity among themselves. Every race of people want unity with their own kind first, except my people, the so-called Negroes in America. Our condition and lack of love for ourselves must be attributed to the slave master. He has been our teacher until the coming of Almighty God Allah. The slave master has robbed my people of their God, religion, name, language, and culture. The worst kind of crime has been committed against us, for we were robbed of our desire to even want to think and do for ourselves. We are often pictured by the slave master as a lazy and trifling people who are without thought of advancement. I say this is a condition which the slave master very cleverly wanted and created within and among the so-called Negroes. Robert H. Kinzer and Edward Sagarin, in their book, The Negro in American Business, page 81, states that the history of America would be different today if the slaves freed from bondage had been given, in addition to the 3 amendments, the Constitution, the famous 40 acres, and the mule. The slaves instead started not only without land and money to purchase it, but with very few avenues open to earn and save money. Ownership of producing land is a prime and necessary part of freedom. A people cannot exist freely without land, and that so-called Negro in America is evident of that fact. But the slave master passed laws limiting the so-called Negro in that land ownership, or limiting the areas in which such purchases or even rentals could be made. Are you not left restricted to the poor sections that the slave master is abandoning throughout America? Again, Mr. Kinzer and Mr. Sagarin gave a hint in their book of the great psychological strategy of the slave master on his slave. That is the original brainwash. On page 84, the author states that the land sold to the ex-slave was of poor quality and an inferior location. They state the so-called Negro faced pressure against his becoming a farm owner and pressure from the white community that he remained a tenant. We encountered credit difficulties, hardships of repayment of loans, and hardship with white executives from whom the white loans must be axed. All of this is a clever plan to discourage my people from wanting to own and producing land for themselves, and to cause a great dislike with them for having anything to do with the tilling, cultivating, extracting, and producing for themselves as other free people and independent people. It is a shame. This shows you and I what white America is to us and just why we have not been able to do anything worthwhile for self. They want us to be helpless so they can mistreat us. As always, we must come together and unite. It is time. I think it is a disgrace for us to be satisfied with only a servant's part. We should and must, as other people, want for ourselves what other civilized nations have. Let us do for ourselves that which we are begging the slave master to do for us. Do not be fooled by the false promise of civil rights and keep the softening of their language. It is offered to you now to keep you from becoming free of their evil plans of depriving you of the offer made to us by Allah. If we will submit to him, he will set us in heaven at once. It is only justice that we be given land and provisions for a start so we may do for ourselves. This is what the other new emerging nations are giving. We want good productive land, not earth that is scorched, but land that will produce crops and hold foundations for structures. Let us make this clear. I am not begging. For it pleases Allah, he will give us a home, and I am with him. Today, according to Allah's word, we are living in the time of the great separation of the blacks and the whites. The prophecy, 400 years of slavery, as to the time the so-called Negroes would serve the white people, ended in 1955. The so-called Negroes must return to their own. The separation would be a blessing for both sides. It was only a solution, according to the Bible, for Israel and the Egyptians. It would prove to be the only solution for America and her slaves. I am for the acquiring of knowledge, or the accumulation of knowledge, as we now call it, education. First, my people must be taught the knowledge of self. Then and only then will they be able to understand others and that which surrounds them. Anyone who does not have a knowledge of self is considered a victim of either amnesia or unconsciousness and is not very competent. The lack of knowledge of self is a prevailing condition among my people here in America. Gaining the knowledge of self makes us unite into a great unity. Knowledge of self makes you on the great virtue of learning. Many people have attempted to belittle or degrade my followers by referring to them as unlettered or unschooled. They do this to imply that the believers in Islam are ignorant. If such a claim were so, then all the more credit should be given for our striving for self-elevation with so little. But truth represents itself and stands by itself. No followers nor any other people are more zealous about the acquiring of knowledge than my followers. Throughout the Holy Quran, the duty of a Muslim is to acquire knowledge is spelled out. My people should get an education which would benefit their own people and not the education adding to the storehouse of their teacher. We need education, but an education which removes us from the shackles of slavery and servitude. Get an education, but not an education which leaves us in an inferior position and without a future. Get an education, but not an education that leaves us looking for the slave master for a job. Education for my people should be where our children are off to themselves for the first 15 to 16 years in class, separated by sex. Then they could and should seek higher education without the danger of losing respect for self or seeking to lose their identity. No people strive to lose themselves among the other people except the so-called Negroes. This they do because of their lack of knowledge of self. We should acquire an education where our people will become better students than teachers. Get an education which will make our people produce jobs for self and will make our people willing and able to go for self. Is this not the goal and aim of many foreign students who are studying in this country? Will not these students return to their own nations and give their people the benefit of their learning? Did not Nukra return to Ghana to lead his people into independence with the benefit of learning he acquired here in America and elsewhere? Did not Dr. Hastings Banda return to give the benefit of his education to his people who are striving toward freedom and independence in Nyasasaland? Nnamdi Azikiwe of Nigeria give the benefit of his education to the upliftment and independence of his people? Does not America offer exchange scholarships to smaller, weaker, and dependent foreign governments so their students will acquire knowledge to aid the people of those countries? Then why shouldn't the goal in education be the same for you and me? Why is scorn and abuse directed toward my followers of myself when we say our people should get an education which will aid, benefit, and uplift our people? Any other people will consider it a lasting insult of the worst type. To ask them to refrain from helping their people to be independent by contributing the benefit of their knowledge. Get an education, but one which will instill the idea and desire to get something of your own, a country of your own, and jobs of your own. I recall back in 1922 or 1923 when a debate was taking place in Congress concerning appropriation of funds for Howard University, a school set aside to train my people in the nation's capital. A senator said this, and it is in the records to be examined in effect, what would be the need of the government appropriation money to educate Negroes? He said they would not teach our people the science of modern warfare, defense, birth control, or chemistry. He knew these were things free people must know in order to protect, preserve, and advance themselves. We have not been able to protect, preserve, and advance ourselves. This shows the slave master has been very successful in dominating us with an educational beneficial to him. This is a saying among us. Mothers may have, fathers may have, but God bless the child who has his own. It is time we had our own. I want an education for my people that will let them exercise the right of freedom. We are 100 years up from slavery. We are constantly told that we are free. Why can't we take advantage of that freedom? I want an education for my people that will elevate them. Why should we always be lying at the gate begging for bread, shelter, clothing, and jobs if we are free and educated? Do not get an education just to set it up as some useless symbolic monument to the black man in the Western Hemisphere. We need an education that eliminates division among us, acquire an education that creates unity and makes us desire to be with our own. The acquiring of knowledge for our children and ourselves must be limited to the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. It should instead include the history of the black nation, the knowledge of civilization of man and the universe, and all the sciences. It will make us a greater people of tomorrow. We must instill within our people the desire to learn and then use that learning for self. We must be obsessed with getting that type of education we may use toward the elevation and benefit of our people. When we have such people among us, we must make it possible for them to acquire this wealth, which will be beneficial and useful to us. One of the attributes of Allah God, the all-wise God, who is the supreme being, is knowledge. Knowledge is a result of learning and is a force of energy that makes its bearer accomplish or overcome obstacles, barriers, and resistance. In fact, God means possessor of power and force. The education my people need is that knowledge, the attribute of God, which creates power to accomplish and make progress in the good things, or we have failed. Why not try Islam? It is our only salvation. It is the religion of Allah, His prophets, and our forefathers. Knowledge of yourself. You are ever making mistakes which will prove fatal to you and others of your own. If you can only recognize the time and knowledge of yourself and kind, the knowledge of the others who are on the same planet rotating around the sun daily, you will know who you are, and you should know who you are as well as know your planet and its consistency, and remember at all times how you were brought here through our parents 400 years ago, and how our parents were mercilessly brought here against their will. They did not ask to come, but were forced and were used for merchandise to be sold and resold for 300 years like livestock and wild beasts. You do not have a second thought about this, because you have in your mind eyes and heart filled with the hopes that you may become one of those who did this evil against our parents and be recognized as a great admirer and lover of these same people who now rehearse the same evil with a little addition: the fire holes and the dogs, the burning and the lynchings of you and your women. You are not able, at this day and time, 100 years a free slave, to protect yourself and your women from the murderous hands of the children of the murderers of your fathers and mothers 400 years ago. Today, God, in the person of Master Farah Muhammad, is asking you and me to accept our own and return to our own kind and some of this earth that we can call our own. And you are rejecting this offer to return to your own unless you can carry the same enemy along who has destroyed your fathers and is now destroying you. They were not brought and sold as you were. They did not come from Africa but from Europe. You are so blinded that you cannot see them, and so deaf that you cannot hear the truth of them, and desire to be one of them and mix into their blood and have them mix into your blood. This is like Sodom and Gomorrah before God. You should remember that you have a great offer made to you in the words, accept your own. To accept your own means yourself and your kind, your God who is of you and you are of him. It was your fathers who created the heavens and the earth. While there is nothing that the white man has created independently, he did not even create himself. The black nation itself created, while the white race is made by one of the gods and scientists of the black nation. Their time on our planet is nothing compared to the time that we have been in the universe on this planet. It is hardly a fraction of a minute if we divide the 6,000 years into our billions and trillions of years. It would run into little or no time at all. We are the originals, so Almighty God, Allah, has revealed. He asks you who belong to the original people of the earth to accept your place among them, since you have been robbed of knowledge and your place on this planet that you can call your own, and your place among your own. You must remember that this is a wonderful offer, and it is a wonderful knowledge to know the truth, and it is even more wonderful to know that the truth is in your favor, and the earth as well as the heavens above belong to you. Accept your own, that which you have been dead to the knowledge of. Now that God has came in your midst to resurrect you and put you in your place of authority, you are ignorant enough to put yourself in the place of a dog at the feet of the white race, begging them to accept you as their brother, when they could not do this if they tried. They would still be deceiving you, and their efforts would end in the manifest truth that it was only false of them to try to establish brotherhood among you. Their time of ruling the people of the earth is up. Accept your place in the sun as it was originally before the creation of this world. You must remember that slave names will keep you a slave in the eyes of the civilized world today. You have seen that Africa and Asia will not honor you or give you any respect as long as you are called by the white man's name. The example was evident when I took Muhammad Ali, the world's heavyweight champion, out of the white man's name. The name itself made him a servant and a slave to the white man. All Africa and Asia then acclaimed him as also being their champion. This shows you that the previous black men of America who were bestowed with the title of the world's heavyweight champion were only exalting the white man of America, Europe, and Australia. Their people said nothing because they were not theirs, and they were not enhancing their honor among the people of the world. Just a change of name has given Brother Muhammad Ali a name of honor and a name of praise that will live forever. His people of the near and far east acclaimed him and laid the red carpet for him to come among them as a prince. I warn you to wake up and accept your own, or go to the doom with other than your own. The duty of the civilized man is to teach civilization to the uncivilized, the arts and sciences of civilized people, and countries of advanced civilization. A divine messenger of God, Allah, raised among his people with a divine message, is held responsible for its delivery. His message teaches spiritual civilization, which is important to the success of a nation and society. According to history, the prophet who refused to accept divine guidance or his message sent by his messengers are classified as uncivilized or savages. A well-educated culture and courteous people make a beautiful society when it is spiritual. Good manners come from the civilized man who does not fail to perform his duty. There are several civilizations. We have a wicked one and a righteous one. It is the righteous civilization that is in the workings now. We all have been trained into the wicked civilization. Now we must be trained into a knowledge of righteousness. We must have a righteous, trained, civilized man who will not fail to perform his duty in guiding and teaching us. My people in America are under the searchlight of the righteous, who are offering to them the right guidance to a supreme civilization of righteousness never witnessed before on earth. The white race has failed to perform its duty of civilizing the American so-called Negroes. Of course, they have been their slaves for many centuries, and the slave masters have rights over them as long as they are slaves. However, if the slave masters free their slaves, not in word but in deeds, the slave masters should provide the one slaves with the right civilization and with everything necessary for them to start an independent life as their slave masters have. Certainly, the so-called Negroes are being schooled, but is this education equal to that of their slave masters? No, the so-called Negroes are still begging for equal education after blinding them to the knowledge of self and others of their kind for 400 years. The slave masters refuse to civilize the so-called Negroes into the knowledge of themselves, of which they are robbed. The slave masters also persecute and hinder anyone who tries to perform this most rightful duty. I will continue to say that as long as the so-called Negro do not know who they really are and do not have the knowledge to free themselves from their slave masters' names and religion, they cannot be considered free or civilized. To this, their slave masters will agree. Some of the so-called Negroes are ignorant of this important advantage of having their own nation names. They think there is nothing to a name, but the Bible says a good name is better than gold. They continue to bear the slave master names, makes my people the property of their slave masters or their children, and we can never hope to receive equal recognition in the civilized world. Will a free people accept slaves as their equal? The so-called Negroes must be truly civilized, and the right civilized man has not performed his duty until that is accomplished. However, the so-called Negro is free to receive his or her own if they just will not allow fear and ignorance to stand in their way. It has been seen from the little chance that they have had to get a little education. They have shown and proved that they are original people who are only asleep and in great need of the right civilized man who will perform his duty of awakening them. The so-called Negroes fear of being deprived of food, clothing, and shelter, and also the usual smile of the white slave masters' children prevents them from seeking the true knowledge of their own nation's civilization. They must drop the slave master names and religion, which both they have and do not understand. This means nothing but slavery. Of course, some preachers and politicians who live off the ignorance of their people are opposed to the right civilization of our people. You must know that you have not been rightly civilized. No one can enslave another who has equal education. My people lack science of the right kind. Allah is here to give you and me a superior knowledge of the things and a country to ourselves. Separation of the so-called Negro from the slave master's children is a must. It is only a solution to our problem. It was the only solution according to the Bible for Israel and the Egyptians, and it will prove to be the only solution for America and her slaves, whom she mockingly calls her citizens without granting citizenship. We must keep this in our minds at all times. We are actually being mocked. I think it is a disgrace for us to ever being satisfied with only a servant's part. Should not we as a people want for ourselves what other civilized nations have? It takes a true friend or friends to help another or others to enjoy equal freedom, justice, and equality. Today, for the first time in our history, we have that true friend in Allah, who came in the person of Master Farah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam, if we only will submit and accept him. It is written in the book of Revelation, chapter 14, verse 1, that 144,000 of us will accept and return to our God and people, and the rest of my people will go down with the enemies of Allah. For this sad prophecy of the loss of my people, I write that I am writing, hoping perhaps that you may be able to beat the old prophet's predictions by making the truth so simple that a fool can understand it. You must be rightly civilized. You must go back to your own people and country, but not one of you can return with that which you have. You must know that this is the time of our separation and judgment of this world that you and I have known. Therefore, Allah has said to me that the time is right for you and me to accept our own. What are you waiting for? The destruction? Come, let us reason together. But you cannot until you have a thorough knowledge of yourself. Who are you waiting for to teach you the knowledge of yourself? Surely not your slave masters who blinded you to the knowledge. The white race civilization will never work for us. America has been number one on the list of God for total destruction for a long time. Even in the prophecy of Moses, Isaac, Habakkuk, and Jesus heard America destruction has been coming gradually for the past 34 years. The nations of the earth are becoming her enemies because of her evils and murders of the so-called Negroes, who now could choose to build the kingdom of heaven. There is no let up in her evil, brutality, and murder of her once slaves, the Negro, who are still her slaves mentally. She would not like you to know that the doom is near because of the way she treated her slaves. She has deceived everyone who deals with her, as recorded in the Revelations of John of the Bible. Today she has, as the revelation of John prophesies, the head of the church, meaning the Pope of Rome, helping her deceive Negroes and keep them in church so that they may be destroyed with her. The only thing that will hold the Negro is his belief in whites as a people of divinity. They hold to this religion, Christianity, which they use to deceive everyone they possibly can. It was through Christianity that they got the authority over black, brown, yellow, and red races. The holding to the white man's name is another chain that carries the Negro down with his enemies. It is laughable and saddening to see the so-called Negro preachers reading and preaching from the Bible while they do not understand it. Negro professionals, scholars, and scientists are still ignorant of the fact that as long as they are in the white man's name, they are his slaves. In every nation, as soon as he presents himself in the name of the white man of America or Europe, they know that he is dumb to the fact that he cannot be free until he break free of his slave master's hold on him, which is his name, his religion, his way of living, and his evil practices. These must be given up before any nation or even God can help or even aid the Negro in becoming a free people recognized by other nations. Proof has been offered in the name of the present heavyweight champion of the world, Muhammad Ali. It is a divine name. Both Muhammad and Ali are names of God. Quickly, the nations of his kind held out their hands and called to him. Christian black preachers have never been so recognized because of their ignorance in holding the name and the religion of their slave master. The revelation of John in the Bible, the revelator representing them spiritually as beasts because of their savage way of dealing with and murdering black people. The revelator of John in the Bible and even Isaiah warn you who hold to the white man's name and his religion. This is your America. We have proven this to you, not your slave master, that you would get to respect and honor you throughout the world if you accept your own and take on the names of the divine supreme being. It is in your Bible, and now it has been made manifest to you. Watch how anxious the white man is to hold you and call you by his name. He still would like to call you the champion Cassius Clay after himself, and he would like to call me pool after himself. This is to keep the blind blind, the deaf deaf, and the dumb dumb, to the knowledge that even the name alone is sufficient to free you of this evil people. I have offered America a solution to a problem with her slaves, but because she knows that you are dumb enough not to want to accept it, she is condemning herself to an early doom by rejecting it. The only way to separate the two people, despite the foolish Negroes' cry that they love white people and want to remain with them, the time has arrived. This is the only way to put off a few more years before your total destruction of America, is to deal justly and fairly with the Negro. But nevertheless, one day it will come, unless she would like to return to Europe instead of sending the Negro back to Africa. The whole Western Hemisphere belonged to the darker people, and Europe was given to the white people. Your anger against the Negro getting a just deal has quickened your doom. America will suffer some of the worst calamities within the next year or two, calamities worse than any nation has endured since man has been on earth. That is, if she does not make the right move. Square up with justice for the slave, and do not try to deceive him through intermarrying with your women. Give him up and let him go, or suffer death and destruction. Today, with all of our white civilized schooling, we have not been taught of our own. They will never teach us of our own. Since the coming of Allah, the reason for not teaching us of our own is made crystal clear. The knowledge that Allah has given to us, the knowledge of our own, being the first people of the earth, we are destined to be the last, and as we are the creators and makers, the limited civilization of the white man and his rule is now terminating, never to be brought into existence again. This makes it absolutely against the will of the white man to honor and respect you and me and our nation as being the first people and the makers of the universe. Why so much teaching and warning given to the American so-called Negro, and so little or no teaching of that kind being given to the African and Asian black nation? It is due to the fact that we are living in the midst of a people whom Allah God will destroy in the very near future. We are on the brink of fire and must be removed to a zone of safety. The ignoring of such warnings and of the time of the judgment of this world, the Caucasian world, with their great universal power that they have exercised over the black nation, makes it very hard for the average black person to conceive of the idea of such a strong race of people being removed. This is a very small thing in the eyes and power of Allah, removing and destroying people who have brought his anger against them for the neglect of worship and respect of him as a supreme being, who do not even respect his representatives but prosecute and kill them. These people have been made the worst to us. Since they have been on the face of the earth, they were created and made for just the purpose of destroying our peace as well as our lives. They have destroyed 600 million of the black nations since they have been on our planet. This averages 100 million every 1,000 years of their rule. They have affected 9/10 of the total population of the black man under this rule, including the brown, red, and yellow races. They have deceived, as the Bible in the book of Revelation says, they have deceived the whole world, and now they are being made manifest as the deceivers and adversaries of Allah and his true religion of entire submission to his will, Islam. The black people of America who have been swallowed by the system symbolically by white slave masters and his children must now be brought out of this race of people and be brought and taught the knowledge of their own. Allah is holding the affair in the person of Master Muhammad. He has chosen us today to be his people and means to take us out and build and establish forever a people of righteousness and a people with unlimited knowledge of the divine supreme being. The very last of one of these will become greater than the greatest of this world. The Orthodox Muslim will have to bow to the choice of Allah. Allah will bring about a new Islam. As for the principles of belief, they remain the same. There will be no more signs to be watched for the coming of God and the setting up of a new world of Islam. We are seeing this change now and entering into it. The devils oppose this change and the Orthodox join them in opposing us because of their desire to carry on the old way of Islam. Allah will place those of his choice in authority in the making of the new world, and others must obey whomever he puts in authority or find themselves fighting against the power of whomever they hold to be on their side and in their favor. We must have a new world. We accept a new nation completely, as Yaqub brought about a people who were a completely new people made out of the original people. Another new people must be made to the new ruling voice of tomorrow out of this world that is now living in her last days. They will be completely new people. The Holy Quran and Bible refer to them as being brought about by the power and the will of God in the person and the resurrection of the mentally dead, lost found original people in America. We may not seem to be pleasing you or to be pleasing to Allah, but it is written in the Bible that he will give to whom he pleases and chastise whom he pleases. This is to warn us that we have no choice in the matter. Whatever Allah desires, he will bring it into being, whether we like it or not.